OK, time for our news review, and we're going to start with the Times World section with that surprise announcement by President Trump that he's banning transgender people from serving in the US military in any capacity. He says they risk burdening the military with large medical bills and disruption.
The Japan Times leads with North Korea and a report by US intelligence officials who believe that Pyongyang may have a reliable intercontinental ballistic missile capable of carrying a nuclear weapon as early as next year.
The picture on the front page of The Telegraph shows just some of the thousands of people in the south of France who've been forced from their homes and indeed campsites to escape the rapidly spreading wildfires there. There are more than 6,000 firefighters trying to deal with those flames. They've been raging for the past 3 days now.
The Telegraph looks at the use of antibiotics, citing a new report which has called for an end to the standard advice we've all got used to that patients should complete every course. Writing in the British Medical Journal, medical experts argue that this puts some patients at unnecessary risk from antibiotic resistance.
In the Guardian business section, the drugs giant GlaxoSmithKline has said it's going to cull more than 30 development programmes in order to make £1 billion of extra savings.
And finally, Amazon has finally joined the elite club of companies with a market capitalisation, a market value of over $500 billion. The internet retail giant will now rub shoulders with other tech giants like Microsoft, Google and Apple.
Right, with us today, Oliver Kornek, who's editor-in-chief at Oxford Business Group. Ollie, thank you very much for joining us once again. Let's get straight on to, I mean, it's hardly an exclusive for the Times, is it? The Trump's transgender ban. Everyone's looking at it in different ways. Your response?
Well, it's been widely condemned across social media. It's on everything, isn't it? And it does seem a real step backward, doesn't it? That there's been such advances for the LGBTQI community in the States, a country that's riven with some really quite heavily conservative elements. And of course, I would argue perhaps President Trump's playing to that. He's trying to push through some particularly difficult legislation at the moment, from the repeal of Obamacare, increasing sanctions against Russia, dealing with other things, and perhaps this is just an appeal to this particularly conservative base. Either way, it looks likely to be a fairly spurious angle. I mean, the cost argument for a start. I mean, the cost of Viagra apparently being given out is $40 million. The cost of looking after people who are transgendering or going through a process is less than $20 million. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. To me, there's greater depth to this, and it's not very pleasant.
I mean, just go on, Ben.
I was just going to say, I heard someone talking about, this is an example of the culture wars that are currently going on in the US between, Donald Trump's core supporters and, those who are sort of more liberal, more progressive, and would balk at this. Absolutely,
I couldn't agree more. It seems to me a bit of red flesh being chucked to his core voter.
And opportunistic. I mean, clearly, it seems that even Defence Secretary Mattis was caught by surprise on this one.
Absolutely, and he's come out with a very moderate response. Interestingly, just to add on to that, the UK Chiefs of Defence Staff have all universally come out saying they support the continued inclusion within the UK forces of people who are transgender, as well as other minorities. I think that's really important, very interesting. Again, plays to that cultural divide, doesn't it?
Although, just a last word, only 18 countries do allow transgender people in their forces at the moment.
Absolutely.
So he's not exactly out on a limb on that one, is he?
Let's take a look at the Japan Times. A reminder, perhaps, that there are some big issues for the US president and others to be grappling with, especially if North Korea ends up getting a nuclear intercontinental missile before the year's out.
Absolutely, and not least, of course, Japan, a very close neighbour to what could possibly be a seriously large conflagration. The interesting angle here, I mean, this is nothing particularly new. We've seen a crank up of these tests, often at quite provocative times. I think one of them was on the 4th of July, a very important date in the States. To me, this just points towards the gradual creep. We've always heard that this was going to be 3 or 4 years away. Suddenly we're talking about a year away for an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear capability. This is really alarming. And we're losing time.
Is that the point, though? This is alarming, or alarmist even, some would suggest, and this is part of an effort for the Pentagon to get more funding at a key time for them. That, you know, you take what opportunities come your way.
Absolutely you do, and rhetoric, of course, is very difficult to read.
Let's move on. This awful situation with the fires, front page picture on The Independent. 10,000 people evacuated from that part of Provence.
Yeah, and it's the height of the holiday season, and it's not just France. Last month and earlier this summer, we've had big fires in Portugal. This is going to be affecting local economies. I mean, it's a tragedy in terms of the local ecology. Big hit to the economy. Big hit if you're away with your family as well. And some of the awful stories around this are that perhaps arsonists are to blame, or perhaps even just casual mistakes out camping and things. Either way, the impact is huge.
You mentioned ecology there. I thought it was interesting. It feels like there have always been fires in Corsica for as long as I can remember, you know, summertime. But with a drop-off of farming, more forestry, there's just more sort of tinder, if you like, to take
And that's certainly true, of course, in Portugal, with these huge cork forests as well.
Good point. Right, where are we next? Oh, now, yes, this is a good one.
Finish the full course?
Haven't we always been told we have to complete the course? Even if you feel better after 2 days, you've got to go through with it. But new suggestion, that's just not the case.
This is all about resistance, isn't it? You know, we've heard for a while now that some of these infections people are often picking up when they're hospitalised, are now becoming untreatable by antibiotics. So it's all about that. And again, I wonder if consumers are going to once again be, oh, the advice is turned on its head. This is all very frustrating. I think the conclusion, there was a voice of moderation here from the general practitioners here in the UK, GPs, saying that actually we need to tailor the course of length of treatment. And of course, that seems to make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, tied in with that sense that we just use too many of these antibiotics. I wonder if this ties in actually to our next story or not. Might be unfair to say, but Glaxo axing 130 brands to save £1 billion, I should say. Clearly a commercial drive going on here, but there is this sense that pharmaceuticals don't want to invest in areas where they can't see the obvious return.
Absolutely, and interestingly, this new CEO, she's from within the organisation, Emma Walmsley, is talking about having a full review of antibiotics at Glaxo. Amongst this big cost-cutting drive, she's looking to make £1 billion of savings. She's hiving off certain areas of the consumer brands, such as the famous drink Horlicks is going, but focusing on some core areas of drugs, HIV, cancer, immuno-inflammatory instances like arthritis and things like that. And perhaps, as you say, rather cynically, that's where the money lies.
Well, they only made £2 billion in profits last quarter, so Ben,
yeah,
give us the last throw of the dice.
Well, here we are. It's a rather exclusive club to be part of, the $500 billion club, and Amazon's now signed up.
Absolutely. And the interesting Financial Times story here finishes with the fact that although the 40% up in terms of its share price, it's still a small player in this very exclusive club. Interestingly, all of them, of course, are tech companies. And you have to ask, don't you, is this a bubble? I hate to be a naysayer, but we've seen this before, these famous names that are here for a moment and gone. However, it does seem that these names have been here for a very long time now. I wonder if this is a real market shift.
In relative terms, I think you're right. Ollie, thank you very much indeed, as ever. Thanks. Good to have you here. Thanks very much.
That's it now. See you soon.
Bye for now.
Now, the Russian authorities say that this anti-corruption protest is illegal, but people have come onto the streets anyway.
The army has been deployed at sensitive locations around the country as part of a 3-month state of emergency.
They've come from the marshes and the swamps where they've been hiding from the fighting and where there's no food.
Over there, it's the Iraqi flag that's flying on the airfield again. This is a landmark moment.
Away from that here, we've just seen confused people who are numb, who can't quite believe what they have seen tonight.
We break stories from more places than any other international news broadcaster. We are the leaders in global breaking news.
Here's a check on the weather forecast right around the world, beginning in North America. It's a story of downpours and thunderstorms across the Midwest, increasingly the northeast USA and eastern Canada. This weather front drifting its way eastwards could bring a lot of rain in a short space of time, flashes of lightning some hail potentially and some squally gusty winds. That could cause some travel problems and some flight delays. Thunderstorms also across the plains into the desert southwest. It stays stubbornly dry for the northwest US and British Columbia, where wildfires continue to burn. We could really do with some rain in this part of the world. There is not very much of that in the forecast. Further south into Mexico, it's a